Welcome to this podcast called Curious About Recovery. I am Kirsten Honeyball. I am your host. And in this podcast, I will be diving deep into eating disorders, which are complex and challenging to navigate. So whether you're a sufferer, a professional, a family or loved one of a sufferer, you can join me as I get curious by interviewing professionals, chatting to eating disorder survivors, and sharing my personal experience with an eating disorder so that you can better understand various perspectives, remove stigma, hear inspiring testimonies, and simply get curious about all things eating disorder related. I would like to put out a trigger warning. These episodes explore the topic of eating disorders, and some content may be triggering to listeners. Topics explored may mention, but are not limited to, trauma, diets, food and body types, suicide, mental illness, substance use, self-harm, violence, gender identification topics, and more. Please take care before listening to any episodes. It's important to note that this podcast is not aimed to diagnose, treat, or cure any form of mental illness and should not be seen as a replacement for treatment of eating disorders. Everything said here is expressed in relation to personal and professional opinions, and listeners should be encouraged to view these episodes as an open-minded exploration of various possibilities and perspective rather than hard facts and solutions. Please take what applies or resonates with you and leave the rest. And if you're struggling with an eating disorder, don't hesitate to reach out to me at kirsten@kirstenhoneyball.co.za.
Today, I'm going to be talking about the concept of relapse in recovery. And the reason why I'm talking about this is because a lot of the time, people who have relapsed in their eating disorder are the kinds of people who are going to be looking for these resources. So I really hope that this helps you if you have found yourself in a space where you've fallen back into old behaviors and you're really just not sure how to get yourself out of it. Firstly, I want to tell you that relapse doesn't mean that you have failed in your eating disorder recovery. And I even find this challenging to accept in my own life because it feels like you're just doing the same thing over and over again. And no matter how hard you try, no matter how willing you are, no matter how perseverant you are, and it just feels absolutely soul crushing when you find yourself in the same position and you're asking, well, how did I get here? Often we resort back to old behavior when we become triggered by situations or are needing to face new situations we've never dealt with before. And what I mean by this is somewhere along the lines in our life, something happened where we got this idea that an eating disorder or the behaviors of an eating disorder like restricting or binging or purging or exercising enabled us to cope with unfamiliar or uncomfortable situations or feelings. And so when we're in our recovery, we tend to learn how to handle these emotions, these feelings in more constructive and helpful ways. And so what happens when you are met with a situation that you've never experienced before, such as someone passing away or starting your own business or something like that? What tends to happen is your mind reverts back to what it knows best. It goes, here's a new and uncomfortable feeling or emotion situation that I don't know how to deal with. And so the first thing I'm going to go to is the thing I know the best and the thing that made me feel safe. And so as much as you may have found new ways of recovering and tools and techniques and all of that stuff, when you're faced with emotions or feelings or situations that are of an absolutely new intensity or of a completely new kind, it can become very easy to slip back into old behaviors. And for that, I want to say, don't judge yourself. Just try to start where you're at and build from there. And in this episode, I'm going to try and explain to you a couple of the tools that you can start implementing in your life to move towards your recovery once again. The first thing to remember is that there are a whole bunch of tools and techniques that you can use that can bring you the same levels of comfort or security or satisfaction or anything like that that you are reaching towards eating disorder in order to try and achieve. You can pick yourself up and start again, no matter how bad or how tiny the relapse has been. But it starts with making a decision to at least try to do this. You have to make that decision. You have to say, I'm going to at least try. And without making that decision, you aren't actually able to move forward. So here are some tips that I've found helpful that may make you more capable of moving out of this space of relapse and back on track with your recovery. The first one is to get honest. You need to tell someone that you trust, preferably a person who has known about your journey all along or is walking this path with you and won't judge you. And if you don't have a specific person, maybe posting on an online support group or getting to a support meeting or simply sharing with a friend or someone that you can get honest with, even if this means getting honest with yourself by writing it down. You need to try and not say half-truths to this person, whoever you've decided to get honest with. A lot of the time, we'll water down what we've experienced because it's embarrassing to get honest and open with exactly what we've done. So maybe we'll say, yeah, I binged on this, but you'll leave out the 10 times you binged on something else. Or maybe you'll say, I purged once when in actual fact you spent 3 days purging. And this is the kind of dishonesty that you want to move away from, because what it does is it reinforces this idea in your head that honesty is conditional and that you can say something just to kind of feel better about yourself, but you're not actually being raw. You're not actually sharing the honest truth. And it is with that sharing of the honest truth, with completely laying the cards out on the table and just saying, this is how it is. This is how bad it is. This is how much I stuffed up. When you do that, it tends to bring more of a sense of relief, because what I find is that when you give half-truths, you actually are just doing it to kind of attempt to feel better about yourself in that moment. You're like, okay, I've told someone, but, I can keep this little bit to myself. I can not let them know how bad it is. And that basically leaves room for that dishonesty to fester up and to build up, because next time you experience that thing, you're like, okay, well, I didn't tell them last time, so this time I don't need to tell them either, And the more and more you do that, the more that you open up the door for just hiding and just never really revealing where you're really at. And that's not beneficial to anyone, especially not beneficial to you and your recovery. Often we try to minimize the extent of our relapses in order to not seem as bad to people on the outside. However, if you are going to tell someone about what you're experiencing, you may as well tell them the whole truth, because they're there in a position to help you, and they can only help you to the extent that you allow them in and to the extent that you're honest with them. The more specific you can be about what you've done and in your honesty, the more freedom you'll achieve. And the more that you bring to light, the less darkness that you'll experience in your recovery. The next step is to forgive yourself. And I know that sounds really crazy, because what you're probably doing is beating yourself up from the inside because you've hit this same wall again and again and again, and you don't really know how to come out of it. But letting go of what has happened and looking how you're going to take the next step forward to move through this relapse is the most important thing. You've got to start where you're at. What's done is done, and beating yourself up about it is only going to make you feel worse. It's only going to make you feel more useless and less likely to put in that action to recover. And when you let go and you forgive yourself, you need to just move into the next best thing that you can do for your recovery. And that could be as simple as cleaning a room. It could be as complex as writing a book, whatever it is that you need to nourish your soul and to move past what you've done and to say, it's okay that I screwed up. This is what I'm doing to try and get better now. And that may happen hundreds of times in a day or a week or a month. But you've got to remember that every single time you mess up, you've got to forgive yourself and try your best to move forward. It's important to take responsibility for the things that you've done, but don't cripple yourself because of the things that you have experienced. Don't hinder your recovery because you're too ashamed to admit and to forgive yourself. The third thing is to spend time in reflection. Now, this is often the thing that we do the least of, because it's hard to sit back and say, well, where did that thought come from? Where did it manifest from? Tracking yourself back to the thoughts and the experiences that you've been feeling over the past day or week or month or even year. Kind of just going, what is it that I am experiencing on a critical level that I'm not allowing myself to admit? Maybe you are struggling to voice yourself in your relationship because you feel that you don't want to displease the person that you're with. You don't want to share your experiences or your emotions or your joy or your personality. Maybe it feels as if you are frustrated in your workplace and you don't know how to get unstuck. Maybe you are experiencing financial fear. And all of these kinds of things can be little triggers that create this idea in your mind that acting out would be the answer. When you spend some time assessing the events, the thoughts, the interactions, and all of that led up to the relapse, so that you can identify what your triggers were, you identify where you're reacting to life with this thought of, I need to control this area of my life or protect myself from this thing by using the eating disorder. And when you start to recognize that the eating disorder is not going to take away your problems, it's only going to make them worse and make you feel worse about your life. When you identify these triggers, it helps you recognize them when they arise again so that you can take preventative action next time they show up and go, hey, I recognize this trigger, I recognize this feeling, and you can go, okay, this is my action plan. This is the thing I'm going to do about this trigger rather than acting out. This takes time. It takes time and honesty with yourself. It takes the ability to be still and sit and go, I'm ready to evaluate myself. I'm ready to look at my bits and pieces that I don't like about me. I'm ready and willing to be honest about who I am. And then the fourth thing is to keep going. So don't give up. No matter how many times you fall, the important part is that you pick yourself up again, remove the feelings of self-pity or anger or frustration, and simply start again. Even if it means you start again 100 times in that day, you've just got to do it. Because the thing is, practicing how to recover is something that might take time. And maybe one day you get it right 5 times and wrong once, and then the next day you get it right 2 times and wrong 5 times. But what you've got to do is you've got to keep going. And if you keep going, then eventually you're going to get to a point where you're actually able to get all those triggers and all of those urges out of the way so that you can start living a happy and joyous life. The next thing, and this is often what people forget, is that you have to keep eating properly. It's vital to continue your healthy, balanced eating plan. If you have a plan, or if you're not sticking to a plan, then carry on eating the way that you are eating for your recovery. It's important not to try and make up for or counteract whatever you've done. So for instance, maybe you have binged eaten a whole lot of food and you feel like, okay, cool, I've got to triple my exercise the next time I exercise. And it's important for your recovery to not do that. It's important for you to go, okay, if I had this 1-hour workout plan, or if I had this 30-minute walk planned, or whatever it is, you've got to stick to that. You've got to keep going from where you're at. Assess your nutritional content and meals with a professional if you're not sure how to eat properly. And make sure that you're getting your basic needs nutritionally met. The sixth thing is to celebrate your recovery. You've got to take some time to focus on the growth that you have made in your recovery. Know that you can keep growing no matter how far down the line you've fallen again. What milestones have you achieved recently? If you can take a list of those things that you've gotten right, and it might not only mean that you look at the food stuff, it might be that you spoke up in a conversation where you felt fearful, or maybe you said no to someone that you usually say yes to. Whatever that milestone is for you, that internal stuff, just focus on it and try and celebrate it. And celebration can be something like sharing it with someone else, or doing a dance, or singing, or doing something nice for yourself, like painting your nails or going for a walk, or anything like that. Celebrate the things that you're getting right in your recovery. The seventh and last thing is to put in the action. Whatever you need to do to get yourself out of this place, you've got to do it. So you need to decide you want to be out of this place, and then you've got to start putting in the actions. So maybe you need to assess your meals. Are you eating properly? Are you nourishing yourself? Maybe you are leading yourself into a binge because you're restricting the whole day. And the way that you're going to stop yourself doing that again is by making sure you're getting enough nutrition throughout the day. Maybe you need a support group or professional help, and you actually need to put in action to ask someone for help. You need to assess what it is that you need to do to support your recovery journey. And you need to do that no matter what. And if you're struggling to do it on your own, find someone who can help you. The most important thing is to recognize that there's no shame in relapse. There's always a way to start fresh, which doesn't mean that I condone the idea of chronic relapse without consequence. It's just that I understand the nature of this illness and how challenging it can be to feel like you're getting it right. I really hope that this podcast episode has helped you if you are struggling with relapse, and just some easy and really manageable tools and techniques that you can just implement right now in your day in order to move into your recovery and away from the relapse that you're in.
Thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. If you have liked it, share it with people who you think might benefit from listening to it as well. Don't forget to go to my Instagram page called @CuriousAboutRecovery to find out about upcoming episodes or to browse the episodes of the past. You can also follow my page called @KirstenHoneyball, where you can get inspiration for your eating disorder recovery.